when you look like this, I mean, looking different than most of the people around you, I'm finding that it's very easy for those people to assume that you do something that, like, to specifically make yourself stand out. And it's funny because, I mean, I have chocolate skin, kinky hair, and a fat ass by DNA. And the fact that I sometimes have Afro puffs or this, that, or the other, I mean, what can you say? And so then, this thing about stop and stare in India, it basically comes down to how do people respond to difference? How do people respond to someone who physically looks different than they do, which is simply a reminder that that person's culture, that person's language, the way that person speaks, their expectations might all be quite different than your own. But this is interesting because as someone who's lived in several different places in the world and traveled to different places, the question always for me is, how do you treat your niggas? You know, how does that nation deal with its so-called minorities? And if those minorities are niggers, then, I mean, if you have an underclass, well, it says a lot. And I also think that it says a lot about how people respond to me on the streets here. It's one thing to be surprised, curious, or interested, but when people are scared of difference, literally, I've had it in Korea. I remember I walked into this doctor's office and the lady literally jumped when she came out from the back to come into the reception area. And what was interesting about it is it wasn't the first time that had happened, but it was the first time that somebody actually apologized. You know, that somebody could recognize that, what signal that sent to me that they were so frightened. And of course, as a person who's different, as a person who has migrated to an area, there's a great deal of onus on my part to understand people, accept that not everyone is accustomed to difference and acquainted with it. But, you know, that makes perfect sense. That's logical. But then go to Africa and you'll see what I mean. Just go to Africa. I mean, I can't speak of Africa, but certainly West Africa. And I don't know. I mean, perhaps it is just that, you know, because of this, the way that African markets are organized, people are accustomed to traveling, moving around, and encountering people whose language is different than theirs, whose customs, whose dress, whose maybe even phenotype may be different than theirs. And for me, it brought about a level of sophistication. Like, I never felt like people were just like shocked. People were curious, and people would ask. But that's the thing, people would approach you and ask, and that's when you start wondering what race has to play in this. And I'm not saying racism. I know that some people's vocabulary around race is so simple that talking about race means that someone has to be sniffed out as a racist. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying is that people's attitudes towards difference in race, in many places being socially constructed as some sort of insurmountable difference. Now think about that for a moment. Just food for thought for today. Peace. Love you.